Hello, I am the voice of an artificial intelligence, and I will translate into English a presentation by Carmelo Dorda, where he explains the practical foundations of essentiality indices in small-scale fisheries, multispecies, and multi-gear, a practical guide on how and why to use them. The original version is indexed in La Escuela of pscavable.com, as we saw in a previous video titled Concepts of Essentiality. This concept arises from a need to determine the importance of each of the species caught in a multi-species fishery. It is a concept that was published in Fisheries Research in February 2022. As we have already seen in other videos, essentiality indices measure the importance of each of the species caught in fishing community where there are several target species. These are dimensionless fishing indicators. That is, they are mathematical variables that do not have units of magnitude and that are used to characterize and evaluate the fishing activity of a given fleet over a period, usually a year. The fact that they are dimensionless indicators enables the following advantages. First, it allows the characterization of a fleet and its fishing activity to be qualified and quantified with numbers. This makes it easier to analyze, understand, and monitoring of fisheries. Second, by using dimensionless indicators, it is possible to compare the fishing activity of fleets of different sizes, fisheries with different species and periods with very different catch volumes. Third, monitoring the essentiality index of a species over the years could detect substantial changes in the fleet that catches it, in the abundance of the resource, in the fluctuation of its market value, or in the impact of new regulations. Fourth, dimensionless indicators facilitate the analysis of possible correlations in the deviation of fishing effort among the target species of a given fishery. It can also define the seasonal periods of each species. We've also explained in other videos that essentiality index is based on three determinants: frequency, fleet recruiting, and income. Frequency is a result of dividing the number of fishing hours or days in which a species is caught by the number of total catch hours or days of all species. Fleet recruiting is the number of artisanal fishing units that fish a species divided by the total number of artisanal fishing units that are operational in the fishing community. However, to avoid accounting for fishing units with only occasional catches, it is required that the percentage of income from that species relative to the total income from all species caught be equal to or greater than 5%, and the income is to estimate relative incomes, dividing the income generated by each species by the income obtained from the species that generate the highest income levels. All these resulting parameters give a dimensionless value between 0 and 1. The closer to 1 the species will be, the more essential it will be. The practical thing about these factors is that they are easily measurable and that the increase in any of them has a positive impact on essentiality. It is evident that the more essential species that exist in a port, the more resilient the fishing activity in that area will be. A fleet's exclusive reliance on a single species makes it highly vulnerable to the fleet's fishing opportunities. Diversifying and increasing the essential value of many species brings strength, versatility, and adaptability to fishing activity. This is achieved by applying management policies that increase the target species, the fishing gear used, the value of the product, and the fishing frequency. If you wish to further explore the nature and characteristics of these determinants of essentiality, you should watch the video entitled Concept of Essentiality or read the paper referenced at the beginning of the presentation. As a result of the interaction of these three determinants and the application of a series of mathematical formulas, several quite practical indicators are obtained. The first is an essentiality index for each of the species caught. Its value is between 0 and 1. The closer to 1, the more essential that species will be. Here is a formula for its calculation, where G is the income index, R is the fleet recruiting, and F is the frequency of capture. The second is the essential capacity of the fishing community studied. It is a numerical value that weights and adds up the total of the essentiality indices of a given fishing community. When its values are higher than 200, it means that there are probably 2 or more essential species and 2 or more fundamental species in that fishing community. If in one fishing community the value is 312 and in another it is 230, then we can say that the first fishing community has a greater polyvalent and versatile capacity than the second. Essential capacity would also make it possible to assess the implementation of measures aimed at increasing fishing essentiality, since analyzing the annual progression of this value could determine the negative or positive effect of fisheries management. And the third is essential potentiality. It is a measure of dispersal that tells us how close the essentiality indices of the 10 most significant species are to each other. Its value, always negative, indicates how close to perfect essentiality the essential indices of the 10 most significant species are as a whole. The closer to zero, the closer to that maximum of essentiality the fishery is. This is therefore a clear indicator that allows managers to quantify variations in the essentiality of a fishery where there have been no changes in the number of essential and fundamental species. A practical example of the representation of the essentiality indices could be this graph. It shows the values of the 10 most essential species for a given fishing community in 2021. For each species, its 3 determinants, income, frequency, and fleet recruiting, and the calculation of its specific essentiality index are indicated. 3 essential species and 4 fundamental species can be observed. Essential potentiality is also represented through this area. The smaller and thinner it is, the closer to essentiality these species will be. In a management policy by objectives, the coherent thing would be to analyze the data obtained, characterizing the importance of each species according to its determinants, to then plan and implement measures aimed at increasing the number of essential species by increasing the value of their determinants, prioritizing the strategy in the fundamental species, and without losing sight of other objectives that are no less important, such as the increase in essential capacity and the decrease in essential potentiality. These actions are easily measurable with annual monitoring analyses of these essentiality indices. Follow-up analyses of the essentiality indices of a given species can be represented in this way. Here is an example of an essential species that has not ceased to be essential in 4 years of monitoring. The table indicates values that help us understand the evolution of their determinants, either numerical or graphic. It is a species with high degrees of essentiality, which shows small fluctuations over the years. Sometimes, the essentiality of a species does not have to be achieved by increasing its determinants. It should be reiterated again that the essentiality index is still a weighting of the importance of one species with respect to the rest. This means that in certain years, it can happen that even if the values of recruiting, frequency, and annual income of that species decrease, the importance with respect to the others has increased. In this monitoring graph, it can be seen that this species, essential during the pandemic year of 2020, obtained much lower values than in previous years. It is evident that its leap from fundamental to essential was due to the decrease in the essentiality of the rest of the species. On other occasions, the essentiality of a species may fall sharply due to a fishing policy that is inadequate for the interests of the fishing community under study and/or seasonal changes in migratory flows. A palpable example of this occurred in 2020, when the closure of the Thunnus alalunga fishery caused the loss of this resource by fishermen from El Hierro. It is a species regulated by means of a system where a joint quota is assigned for the total of the Spanish fleets. In the Canary Islands, this species is usually present in 2 seasonal periods, one in the spring and one in the fall. In the Cantabrian Sea, it represents an important and intense fishery in the summer months, constituting the so-called Costera del Benito, which usually ends up consuming the entire national quota, preventing the capture of this species during the second Canarian seasonal period. Variables such as seasonal changes in migratory flows or decisions such as a precautionary closure of the fishery and the late opening for the use of a small unconsumed remnant have had very different consequences in the 4 years of monitoring. We see, therefore, how the essentiality values of these species fluctuate between the fundamental, complementary, and even the non-existence of catches in 2021. Issues that do not necessarily have to do with the abundance of the species in the seas of El Hierro. Well, that's all for now. We're leaving. Thank you very much for your interest. And if you find this video entertaining and productive, you can find more in La Escuela de Pescavable or on the YouTube channel. Don't forget to sign up for the website crew and subscribe to YouTube channel to stay up to date with updates. Greetings and good sea.